Hi there. Hello. Welcome back to the Pitch Grid. Thank you so much for joining us once again. We are going to have a pretty full episode today as we are going to cover all the previous week action and news from the EFL and the Week 8 NFL action. So let's go get right to it. Let's head pitch side first. We start in Portsmouth. Huge game for two lower table teams between Portsmouth and Sheffield Wednesday. Portsmouth came into this game having not won a single game at home. They were at the bottom of the table, and they really needed this win. Sheffield Wednesday kind of coming off of an inconsistent form, not really knowing, you know, what they really needed. One win in the last 3 games over Coventry. Otherwise, 4 games. In their last 4 games, they had 2 draws, 1 loss, and a win. So they really needed to find a win to really keep their platform steady on the table. Yeah. So this kind of started out a very weird, ugly game at first. Kind of started opening up around the 30th or so minute when Portsmouth just took advantage of a Sheffield Wednesday injury. Wednesday had to sub off a guy. Um, because of that, because of an injury, and Portsmouth just took advantage of it. They really had a lot of the possession, dominated the last part of the first half, and they got the result right before halftime as Connor Ogilvie scored in the 44th minute to take for Portsmouth to take a 1-0 lead into that break. Um, but then all of a sudden, it kind of changed slowly. Portsmouth started the second half well. They kind of started where they left off. But then slowly Sheffield Wednesday kind of crept back into this game, and then Josh Windus equaled in the 55th minute, and it kind of just changed the entire game on its head. As Sheffield Wednesday just seemed like they could not be stopped, and uh, yeah, they just kept the possession, dominated it for the most part, and then in the 70th minute, Michael Smith hits the worldie of a goal to put Wednesday on top 2-1. Top class strike from way outside the penalty area. Slots into the top right corner. It's 2-1. And Portsmouth just could not recover from that at all. They they just could really get a clear target. They had a couple of chances near the end, but nothing absolutely like clear cut. And it ends 2-1 Wednesday. And Portsmouth still without the first home win of the year. Wednesday dominated, got the possession, won the possession battle 59.5% to 40.5%. Both had equal shots attempts. Sheffield Wednesday had the more on goal, 3-2. More yellow cards, 3-1. Both had equal amounts of corners. And Wednesday made the more saves. It just felt like a game that both teams needed to win, wanted to win. But Wednesday just took over in the end. They just have the better talent overall, really. Let's be honest. Portsmouth are a scrappy team. Don't get me wrong, but like they just don't have the ammo right now to compete with better teams that have even just slightly better talent. And yeah, you could see them very quickly if they don't fix something quick. You could see them easily being relegated back to League One rather quickly, and this could be a very bad year for Pompey. It's frustrating because Pompey are pretty, decent side. They've got a great home field advantage. Their crowd support is amazing at home. Their fan travel is great. The Pompey fans deserve a lot better than what they're getting this year. Let's just say that. Moving on to the Saturday games, Bristol City versus Leeds ended in a 0-0 draw. Um, this was a game that you kind of wondered if Bristol City might pull out a draw just because they have been incredibly draw heavy lately and can limit teams to that. This shouldn't have been based on the stats. Leeds dominated the time of possession. The possession battle, 67.8% possession to 32.2%. They had the way more shots, 17 shots to 4, all of them 5 of those on target. Bristol City had none on target, which just shows how good Leeds defense can be. Just no one could be clinical. No one. Bristol City had the more corner kicks, ironically enough, but they just uh, Leeds didn't have to make a single save. Obviously, Bristol City had to make 4 saves. It just the Bristol City keeper standing on his head, and that's what you want from O'Leary, who's one of the better keepers in the championship. Um, and Bristol City get a point out of this against one of the hotter teams in the championship, and they needed this to keep themselves in the top, the top half of the table. Uh, but you feel like Leeds should feel like they got more out of this than they actually did. Um, it just is very disappointing for them. Bristol City, I'm sure, feels like a huge, huge point, even if it's just 1 point. Um, Coventry, Luton. This was a game that was billed as El Sacico by a lot of teams. Both teams really struggling to really just wanting to get out of the relegation zone. And Luton came into this game on a kind of a bit of a hot streak. Coventry really had just dipped into the relegation zone with a draw in QPR. Luton coming off a good, solid performance against Luton. Against Sunderland, even though they lost, it was felt like overall they played a much better game on another day. They probably would have won. Um, this game got out of hand. This was a crazy game. Started off, Luton just they took a 2-0 lead into the half. It just felt like they dominated the game in the first half. Carlton Morris got a 15-minute penalty, slid that home, and then the 37th minute, Elijah Adebayo scored a second goal. It felt like Luton wasn't going to be able to be stopped. Coventry couldn't do anything. They had same old story for them where they had the shots, they just could not be clinical with them. But that all changed in the second half at the 59th minute when Ellis Sims slot home a goal off a brilliant header. And then Victor Torp got a second goal in the 76th minute. And then the moment that probably changed the game for Luton was when Thomas Holmes was sent off. He'd already been shown a yellow card earlier. He had a poor challenge in the 90th minute, which he got sent off for. It resulted in a free kick, which Haji Wright got the ball off of and slotted home to put Coventry up 3-2 at home. And really, there wasn't much Luton could do in the last few minutes. Yeah, this was a game Luton should have won. And, you're up 2-0. You'd think you'd win it. Good positions as well when you start dominating in the second half as well. Coventry just were the better team in the second half. And it shows in the stats, really. They had 66 possession to Luton's 33.4. 25 shot attempts for Coventry to 9 for Luton. Uh, Coventry had 10 of their 26 shots on goal to 5 for Luton. Uh, 11 corner kicks. This just shows. I mean, Coventry does deserve the win overall based on the stats alone. Shows they dominated the game really and deserved all 3 points. And they do because they made a great comeback. You just felt bad for Luton, who just looked like they had the game in hand, and they just blew it. And that's that's about all you could say. It puts Luton in the relegation zone. Coventry moves up into the spot. I think that was where Luton was, 18th. Yeah, so they switched spots basically after this game, and yeah, Coventry has to feel good about themselves after that, even though they're only a point off of Luton, ahead of Luton in the relegation battle. So it's not exactly like they're out of reach at all. They're still very much right in the thick of the relegation battle, but it's good for their fans to think, oh, we've gotten a little bit of distance and hope after this kind of game. So Coventry needed this win. Luton really did not need this result, and even though they thought they had all 3 points for a while. Watford Blackburn. This was a game of two teams in the top 10. Really, I think one was ninth. Watford was ninth coming to this. Blackburn was sixth on 18 points. Watford, they came into this game, on a really weird kind of run of form. They'd lost to Leeds and Luton off the back of a win over Middlesbrough. Blackburn kind of coming off some struggles, even though they had come off a draw with West Brom, but they had beaten Swansea, but they'd also lost to Plymouth and Coventry. So it's a very inconsistent ship and kind of bit them in the end, really. It was a very even game for the most part. Um, it just Watford earned a penalty in the 71st minute, and Ito Kayembe, one of the championship's uh, interesting scorers, he scored the 71st that penalty in the 71st minute, and yeah, it pretty much earned them all 3 points because these teams were pretty even. Blackburn had 53.5% possession to Watford's 46.5. Both had a decent, even amount of chances. Watford had 10 to Blackburn's 12. Blackburn had two shots on goal to Watford's one, which was the penalty. So this really comes down to Watford were clinical in the penalty shot. Blackburn just couldn't slot anything home. Um, Watford did have more set pieces off corners, 6-3, and yeah, this just kind of a. It feels like Watford kind of get lucky in these circumstances at times. Blackburn, they feel like we could have gotten a draw on this. They just couldn't finish, and this feels like a good win for Watford. They jumped up to seventh as a result of this, tied with Blackburn on points. They just have a really bad goal differential that kind of hurts Watford's uh, case here. But it was a interesting, even game for the most part. Just came down to Watford converting a penalty, and um, yeah, Blackburn couldn't convert any of their shots. So yeah. Burnley QPR. Burnley came into this game second place. QPR, off the draw with Coventry. Burnley coming into this with a 1-1 draw at Hull. Um, which they had to come back and make it a draw. Um, this game just so it ends 0-0. Um, it really didn't feel like it should have though, because you look at the stats. Burnley had 74.9% possession to QPR's 25.1. So that means Burnley have the ball a lot, and they couldn't do anything with it. Look at the shots they had. 22 shot attempts to only 2 for QPR. 4 of the 22 shots for Burnley were on target. QPR none on target. 16 corner kicks for Burnley to 1 for QPR. Burnley should have run away with this. This should have been 3-0 easily. This is kind of embarrassing for Burnley, let's be honest. Who come in this game, people were talking about, oh, they're very inconsistent. If they win, it's a very scrappy game. They come off of one goal wins usually or draws. I mean, just look at these results here for the last 4 games for Burnley: 1-0 over Plymouth, 0-0 draw with Preston, 2-0 win over Sheffield Wednesday, and a 1-1 draw with Hull. So you have to wonder: is Burnley overlooking QPR? What happened here? Because this should have been, by all accounts, by the stats, this should have been a dominating win for Burnley. Scott Parker just this is a worldie of a what in the world happened here, because Burnley, I mean, QPR is going to take the result anytime because it helps their cause to get out of the relegation zone. It just sucks for Burnley because now they're asking a lot. There's a lot of questions to be asked at Turf Moor, like how are they going to score goals? Because it feels like if they feel like they don't have a consistent striker, and they have some problems. They have a great defense. That's not the problem. Like, their defense is amazing. It's one of the best in the championship. They just don't seem to have a one guy that can be clinical enough to just finish opportunities consistently, and that's concerning. Like Brownhill, he's been one of their better players and one of their better scorers. He just never consistently finds himself on the score sheet. And when Brownhill's your main scorer, a midfielder, that says something, I think. And yeah, it's just for a team that came down for the Prem, really were tipped heavily to win the division quite easily, or one of the teams to win it because they were one of the newly relegated teams, and usually those teams are the teams that will be the better in the championship because they have extra resources from the Prem, they'll have parachute payments, etc. That's why this year is so important for Leeds in particular. Um, yeah, it just this feels like a very lost opportunity for Burnley to keep pace with Sunderland. And I mean, this gets them 1 point, so like they're not like it wasn't a total wash, but still, this should have been all 3 points to Burnley, and it wasn't. And Burnley fans, I'm sure, are kind of starting to get frustrated with what in the world is going on here, um, in terms of how we're going to score goals and how we're going to be able to keep pace in the auto promotion race because Leeds is right on their tail. And if Burnley isn't careful, Leeds could easily. They're tied on points with Leeds and only up in second place because of a goal. They have a plus 12 goal differential. Burnley does to Leeds plus 11. So one slip up, Burnley could be starting to slip down that table, and that's not where you would expect, or I would think Burnley fans would want or expect this team to be, because this is a Premier League club, and they act like it in a lot of cases. So yeah, this is a lot of questions Burnley need to answer before this slips away. Whole Derby. This was at Derby County, where I think we talked about Derby County just do not seem to know how to lose at Pride Park, and this showed. Uh, Xavier Simmons scored in the 57th minute to give Hull the lead, and Dewan Brown in the 66th minute knots it up for Derby County, and it ends at 1-1. And this was a game that kind of felt like a nothing burger in the first half, just kind of heated up a bit. Both teams had their shots. 14-11 in favor of Derby County, actually, even though Hull had the better possession, 58.4% to 41.6. Hull had the more shots on target. They Derby had more corner kicks, which is usually, as we've seen this year, kind of a recipe for Derby County to score their goals because they just have a very lengthy physical team that can score off set pieces, kind of like Luton. Um, yeah, this in a way this feels fitting for these two clubs because they're so similar in terms of points, in terms of just where they are at the table. Um, yeah, I mean Hull is only a point back of Derby, even though they have a -2 goal differential to Derby County's nil, 0 goal differential, which means they've scored as many goals as they've conceded, 15 apiece. And yeah, it's a very apt middle of the championship type of game where there's nothing to really separate the two, and you can yeah, this was kind of a nothing burger, a wash for both teams. Both teams really want to climb the table. Hull, they were up in ninth place 2 games ago when they came into their game against Norwich, and now they are all the way tumbling down to 15th. Shows you how quick things could go in the championship from positive to negative. And yeah, Hull need to find some answers too because they've kind of started to dwindle after the little 2 game spurt they had that was looking so good for them, honestly. That this is their second straight 1-1 draw after losing 2 straight to Norwich and Sunderland. So they've got some games against Portsmouth and Oxford, which Portsmouth should be a winnable game for Hull, but you never know because Hull are just very consistent. But yeah, this was a game both 1 3 points. They'll take a draw, but it's a very to me it feels very mid-table championship type fixture. Sheffield United took care of business with Stoke. Not much to say here. Kiefer Moore finally got on the score sheet for Sheffield United, and then Tyrese Campbell also got on the score sheet as well. With the second just to put Stoke away. Stoke, they're at the bottom of the table for a reason. They've started to fade after a couple of interesting results. They are now behind Coventry City actually, with a -4 goal differential. Stoke are just starting to fade out. Ever since the appointment, they've had some plucky results, like the 2-2 draw with Bristol City last week. That was kind of lucky. They had the 1-1 draw with Norwich, the draw with with Swansea before their that's all after their loss to Middlesbrough. So, they've been a very draw heavy team except for the thrashing they gave Portsmouth. So, yeah, this was you kind of felt like this was a game they needed to win, but it's against Sheffield United who came off the midweek loss to Middlesbrough. And yeah, this was a kind of a bounce back game Sheffield United needed as well to keep themselves in the top half of the top six. So yeah, this good win for Sheffield United, kind of expected. Stoke, yeah, kind of expected what happened as well. Sunderland, Oxford. Sunderland came away with a pretty convincing 2-0 win. They got goals from Joe Bellingham and Wilson Isidore. Who else? Their two main scorers in the championship. Sunderland kind of took this game by the scruff of the neck, never let it go. They dominated possession, 64.3 to 35.7. Shot attempts, yeah, fairly lopsided, 13-5. Shots on goal, 6-2 in favor of Sunderland as well. Yeah, this Sunderland just keeps on rolling. And that's all you can really take for this. Oxford usually are a pretty plucky side, but it's at Stadium of Light where Sunderland just do not lose at all so far this year. And I mean that could absolutely change this season, but right now it's coming very close to um it's coming close to almost a fact that Sunderland just cannot lose at home. Even though that could absolutely change in the blink of an eye um for Sunderland. Oxford, this is kind of what you would expect, but at the same time, just very unfortunate for them. The plucky side just can't, they come up against bigger clubs, they just can't do it. And so unfortunate for them, but it's kind of expected. Millwall, Swansea. Millwall take out the Swans in a 1-0 win at uh, in Wales. Millwall just kind of scrapped this one by thanks to Casper Denor in the 90th minute, a very last second goal. Otherwise, it was kind of a mad game. Even Swansea really dominated the stats here as well. 71.7% possession for the Swans, and Millwall, yeah, they just couldn't do anything on the ball. 17 shot attempts for Swans, only 6 for Millwall. Um, and 5 of those on target for Swansea. 10 corner kicks. Yeah, this feels like a very lost opportunity for Swansea to get all 3 points. Kind of unlucky too because it was a last minute goal. Yeah, so unfortunate for Millwall, for Swansea, but Millwall get all 3 points and keep their climb up to the top of half of the table where they are now 10th sitting on 16 points. So good for Millwall. Kind of an underrated story this year. They've just been getting some good results, across the table, like their draw with West Brom, um, their win over Plymouth, their draw with Derby County. So it's kind of a weird team that kind of feels like they could probably stay in 10th. Kind of feel like Preston North End last year, where they just they get enough results to stay at the top half. They beat the teams they should beat, and they you know are solid enough to do that. But I guess the better teams they just can't find answers. So that kind of feels, except for Cardiff. Somehow Cardiff is the exception to that rule because Cardiff are just on a roll lately. And speaking of Cardiff, they got a 0-0 draw at the Hawthorns. West Brom just seems to be collapsing under our very noses. They get off to a very hot start, and now are just cannot find a win to save their lives. Um, Another draw with a team they don't need to be drawing with in Cardiff. Um, yeah, this feels. very it's a very disappointing result for West Brom. It's a good result for Cardiff, who keep their hot streak going and have now climbed up to 12 points after being at the bottom of the table for so long. Um, yeah, this feels like a deserved result for Cardiff. Even the stats probably do not indicate that. West Brom did dominate the time of possession. They had the way more shots on goal, way more shot attempts. Period. 19-5 in favor of West Brom. 4 shots on target to none for Cardiff. Yeah, this feels like West Brom should have got away with something, but uh, credit to the Cardiff goalkeeper. He was brilliant. Uh, he had 4 saves. This just feels like a result Cardiff had to scrap by, and they did. And it's a good result for them against a top half team in West Brom who are now searching for answers. Um, yeah, West Brom needs something to go right for them now because they haven't had a win since September 28th. Since September 21st, a 1-0 win over Plymouth at the you know very early doors of the season. And yeah, this was just yeah ugly, ugly, ugly result for West Brom. They are searching for answers. They've got games against Luton and Bromley, Burnley and Hull. So they've got 2 winnable games for them. If they can't really win against Luton, they've got some problems because it doesn't get any easier after the Luton game. You got 3 of 4 of these next uh, 5 games that are tough. You got Burnley, you got Norwich, and you got Sunderland. So you need West Brom really needs all 3 points in the next game, or else this could be hot water for Carlos Corberan fast. And I like Carlos Corberan. He's one of the better managers in the championship, I think. Uh, he just is starting to find a rough patch, and the good teams always find a way to get out of those rough patches. And this is where Carlos Corberan um, needs to find the way to turn it around for West Brom. So yeah, it's kind of a nothing burger of a game, but yeah, still West Brom should have won it. We get to the exciting game of the Saturday slate of games: Plymouth and Preston. Um, Now you wouldn't think this was a result that would be exciting, really, but it's because of how it ended. That's kind of weird. So Preston came into this game on a bit of a tear. They needed it, and they came out hot. They started off with a Sam Greenwood goal in the 16th minute, Fortier in the 48th minute, third minute stoppage time in the first half. Mats Fortier made it 2-0, and then Brad Potts coming out of the half, 3 minutes into the second half, made it 3-0. And you were like, man, Preston are just cruising to a win over Plymouth. And then Plymouth decided to wake up. They get a first goal by Asaka in the 55th. Andre Gray in the 82nd minute made it 3-2 Preston. And you were starting to think, okay, this is kind of, starting to be iffy. And then it just turns all of a sudden. In the 92nd minute, Morgan Whitaker gets a screamer of a goal in the top corner, and it's tied at 3. Um, yeah, I really don't know how to explain it. Just Preston dominated for the good first half and the first few minutes of the second. And then once Plymouth started scoring, they kind of seemed to get their belief under them, and they fought. This is something that's just you didn't expect from Plymouth, really. They It's a good result for them, really, because it shows they can fight. They dominate. They get the possession battle win, 57 to 43%. They get 12 shots to Preston 16. Preston, they edge Plymouth a lot of the stats, like shots on goal, 8-6. They had um they had fewer corner kicks, but also like this should be this is a good result for Plymouth. Um, Sam Greenwood had a shot saved in the 97th minute, which should have been, which would have been the game winner. It was a very good save by the keeper. It just wasn't good enough to get the goal for Preston to win this, and Preston wanted this win bad. Like this would have really changed a lot in terms of momentum for the side, where they were at the table. As it is currently, Preston they jumped to 16th on 14 points. They were at 13th. This would have jumped them all the way up to the top 10, actually, if they held on to a win. Well, top 11. They would have been 11th after this win. So this would have been huge for them to get back high where they were last year. It shows, Preston has shown a lot of progress under Paul Heckingbottom. But this was a game where, man, it's kind of frustrating as a Preston fan, I bet, to just see it could just swirl away like that after such a good start to the game where you're up 3-0. You feel like you're cruising, and then you get goals that are just kind of good, good goals and that are well worked, and that Plymouth just could, that Plymouth really needed the point as well because that helps them, stay above the relegation zone barely by a point. So yeah, this was a good result for Plymouth. Heartbreaking one for Preston. Another one that was a cracker of a game. Norwich Middlesbrough on Sunday was the end cap of the week for the EFL, and boy, was this a good game in terms of the neutrals. Uh, Middlesbrough had a great. It did start out great for Middlesbrough. Norwich took a 1-0 lead. Um, but then after that, Middlesbrough scored three straight goals in the first half to take a 3-1 lead into the break. Just Borja's signs, man. He had some great goals. His first one was a banger, both way outside the box, and the second one was also kind of similar. Just nothing Sonny Dieng, the Borough goalkeeper, could do. And then an unlucky error, ties it up. Tommy Conway misses a penalty for Borough that would put them up 4-3. Norwich did have a man set off in the 87th minute for a bad tackle. And it was his second yellow as well. So that, it had him sent off, kind of killed any momentum Norwich had, and Borough were able to just get away with a point. And I mean, honestly, this is as frustrating a result as this was for Borough, who, edged Norwich in a lot of the results. This is still a good result, regardless, coming into this week of results. The midweek game against Sheffield United and Norwich were seen as tests of where Borough were actually in terms of the top six. And it shows they aren't far off. And it shows also that they are proving they can score goals. They're starting to become more clinical, which I think is good, and I think shows that Borough are a side that to be feared really in the championship. They had 14 shots to Norwich's 9. They had 8 shots on goal to 3. It really you could blame a lot of people for Borough collapsing in this. It just feels like an unlucky result. Honestly, Tommy Conway missing a penalty in the 69th minute that would make it 4-1 at that point. Um, yeah, it was just unlucky. Norwich, I think, kind of took courage in the fact that he missed the penalty on a kind of a weak attempt, and they scored the 2 goals in rather quick succession. Yeah, it was unlucky for Borough. Both teams are still tied on points at 18. They're only a point off of the playoffs. Both are at 18. So it's not like they're out of by any means out of the playoff hunt, the top 6. Borough have a stretch of games against Coventry, QPR, and Luton, and Oxford. So those are games that if they can take advantage of those will be, that's perfect for them. Two two of those are going to be at home, Luton and Coventry. They could take advantage of those 3 or 4 games. They could easily shoot up the table quickly. And if they play like they have the last 2 games, I'm sure Borough fans at the beginning of the week would have bitten your hand off for 4 points out of 6 of the last 2 games against Sheffield United and Norwich. Especially Norwich, who were undefeated at home and looked like they could crush anybody at home. And people were predicting Norwich to win this rather comfortably too. So this is a good result for them. Norwich have a stretch of games against Their next four are Cardiff, Sheffield Wednesday, Bristol City, and West Brom. So they've got a mix of tough and easy. Well, easy. Cardiff has not been easy to break down. Let's be clear. It's at Cardiff, where Cardiff has been resoundingly better than they are on the road lately. And Sheffield Wednesday also are kind of on a weird, kind of slightly hot patch. Even if they've had a loss in the last four, they've won and drawn one, won two and drawn one. Also in that 4 game stretch, so they're kind of coming back. So this is a game that's a measuring stick for both. They just now need to keep on plugging away, and if they can do that, and also Borja Size is just a beast from Norwich, man. Just a great scorer of goals. And yeah, he's the championship's best scorer this year by far. And that's our pitch side recap for the week. Let's head over grid side. We do have some breaking news actually. Um, both let's go over the game first that has kind of precipitated both of the breaking news for the week that just dropped actually as we are recording. Um, Colts Texans. This was a game, that a division game that would have decided first place in a lot of ways for the AFC South. The Texans took a pretty commanding lead of 17. Well, it was a close game for most of it until they took a 20-10 lead, and then just Colts came back with a field goal, and then Kyrie Fairbairn made it 23-13, and then the Colts came back with a touchdown, and they looked like they could have had a chance, but they recovered a fumble by the Texans, but they just couldn't do anything with it, and the Colts just couldn't do anything with it, and yeah, the Texans just ground the clock down and came away with a close 23-20 win. It was a interesting game, a typical divisional game where you never know what you're going to expect. Um, the big story two big stories that came out this game, and then we'll get to the breaking news. Um, Anthony Richardson, he didn't play his best game this game. Um, he was 10 of 32, 178 yards, a touchdown and pick. He runs on a play in the third quarter. It looks like the Colts are going to start driving the ball. I believe it's a 1 yard run, and he points to the bench and taps out. Um, yeah, why? Why is the face of the franchise for the Indianapolis Colts tapping himself out, saying, I need a break, I need a breather because I'm tired, in the third quarter of a very important divisional game, a game which could determine the Colts' playoff status come the end of the year? Um, it's just such a bad look for Anthony Richardson to do this right in the middle of a game they needed to win. And they were behind, and he had not played great this game. And it wasn't like, some of the games this year where it's like, oh, he's played great. Just the results haven't gone his way. No, this was a game that he just played poorly in, and then he taps out. Don't think, I think he came back in later and finished the game. But also for the Texans, Stephon Diggs went down this game. He was their big free agent signing for the Texans this year to help complement Tate Dell and Nico Collins on the Texans receiving core. He went down with a non-contact injury in this game. Well, breaking news: Anthony Richardson has been benched for Joe Flacco, who had been playing pretty well for the Colts in the absence of when Anthony Richardson was hurt. He guided them to a loss over to the Jaguars in a very competitive game, and then a win over the Titans and a win over the Dolphins. No, Anthony Richardson came back for the Dolphins game. My bad, but he got them a win over the Titans. You know, kept the ship solid at the quarterback position, and so now the Colts turn to him because they feel like because according to the report, Anthony Richardson um it was benched because of his attitude in this game. The official report is let's go to the Adam Schefter report. Um, A QB change for the Colts. Indianapolis is benching former first-round pick Anthony Richardson turned to veteran Joe Flacco. Sources tell at Fowler ESPN. So Jeremy Fowler of ESPN and me. Coaches met this morning and made the seismic organizational decision to change quarterbacks. Yeah, this is huge because it's it's believed because he does not have the mentality to do this. In the organization is the report also, I believe, by Fowler. Let's look at the Fowler tweet real quick. Um, yeah, he just says it's a major shift, but that's the kind of belief. And then also, let's go to the Stephon Diggs news. There's breaking news on that front. Stephon Diggs has suffered a season-ending injury, torn ACL, so that ends his season for this year, and that hurts the Texans so much because they already have Nico Collins on IR. Uh, is now Stephon Diggs is out, and so Tank Dell is going to be the main receiver for this Texans offense. And yeah, this just is not good. Even in a win, it feels like a defeat for the Texans because this wide receiver room coming into this game looks stacked. Um, like man, they could go on a seismic run, and they have not looked great lately. And that's partly because of injuries, and now it looks even worse because Stephon Diggs is out. He was such a huge signing in the offseason for a lot of money out of Buffalo, and now he's gone for the rest of the year. How this will affect the Texans, we don't quite know yet because you can never know with this thing. But this was breaking news just as we were recording this, so had to cover that game first before we go on to the next one. Vikings Rams. This was a game I thought would be close. It was a very good game to start off. Rams came into this game. They got Puka Nakua and Cooper Kupp back at the same time. This was huge. Both teams came out red hot, scoring 2 touchdowns in their first 2 possessions. Vikings just absolutely died on offense after that. The Rams made a lot of good adjustments in this game to whatever the Vikings were trying to do, and yeah, this kind of got out of hand quickly because the Rams took the 21-17 lead in the third quarter after the Vikings took a 17-14 lead out of half. And yeah, the Vikings just kicked field goals and the Rams scored touchdowns. That's basically it. Cooper Kupp, you could tell this was a game that rejuvenated the Rams offense big time. Cooper Kupp and Puka Nakua just really lit a fire under this Rams offense, and they looked like the Rams offense of old. Just if you covered Kupp, you went to Nakua. If you covered Nakua, you went to Kupp. It really never mattered because both just were on fire today. Um, and Puka led the receiving room for the Rams with 7 catches for 106 yards. Kupp had 56 yards and a touchdown off of like 3 receptions, I think it was. Stafford had a great game through 4 touchdowns. And the Rams defense really kept Sam Darnold in check. He didn't have a turnover. He went 18 of 25, 240 yards, 2 touchdowns. The play that sealed it was kind of controversial. Um, the Vikings got it on the 3 yard line, their own 3 yard line. They were going to go drive and try to tie the game. It was 28-20 at this point. Sam Darnold gets sacked. It's called a safety. You go back and look at the replay. It's a very obvious face mask that was not called. Um, and yeah, it wins the Rams the game because it was at like 1:38 to go. Of course, Rams get the ball after a safety because whoever gets the safety, you get the ball in possession. After that, they just ran the clock out. And yeah, this it sucks for the Vikings because this was a very unlucky loss coming off of a very unfortunate loss to the Lions, where they played well in that game. And just man, you gotta feel bad for them. Vikings have been playing so well. They came into this, second place. They are now third in the division behind the Packers and Lions. We'll get to that in a bit. But yeah, this was a game the Vikings wanted to win to kind of reestablish their rhythm, and they go from undefeated to losing 2 straight now. It's kind of crazy how momentum can turn in the NFL. Patriots Jets. This was a game that kind of was going to determine last place in the AFC East. Jets, trying to find a way to break a 4-game losing streak. Patriots really trying to find anything and to, break their own 6-game losing streak. And they played great. Drake May looked amazing once again. Um, it's really unfortunate because he was playing amazingly well. Kid was just lights out for most of this game when he played, and he got a concussion to, I believe it was the second quarter, and yeah, he did not return to the game. Jacoby Brissett came in and played admirably, went 15 to 24 for 132 yards. Drake May was great. He just ran the ball a lot in this game and showed his scrambling ability. And honestly, he's really matured, showed a lot of maturity for his age. The few games he's played this year, I think it was a great call by Jerron Mayo to start him. And really, coming off of the loss to the Jaguars last week and, Jerron Mayo calling this team soft, this was a great response to that. It showed really that this team does have toughness in it. It does have grit because this was a tough game. The Jets were trying so hard. They took the lead 22-17 with 2:57 to go in the game. And then the Patriots just take this very clinical, very Patriots-esque drive right down the field, take all the time off the clock, and with 22 seconds left, Ramondre Stevenson scores on a 1-yard touchdown run. And they take the lead 25-22. And the Jets just couldn't get back into range, and they lose their fifth straight. And this is just so bad for the Jets. This is a game in which they needed to win to keep themselves alive in the AFC playoff hunt and show that they aren't as bad as they would like to, as people would think, and they are. And it shows they exactly are that good, that bad. Um, Even with Devontae Adams traded to them, they just look bad on offense. The defense, kept the Patriots in check for most of this game, and kept the Jets in the game and allowed them to take the lead. That wasn't the problem. This also, by the way, was Hassan Reddick's debut for the Jets after signing a contract extension with them. So his holdout ended, and his was his first game back. I believe he played pretty well, actually. Um, yeah, looking at Aaron Rodgers, he did have a bad stat line, like 17 to 28, 233 yards, 2 touchdowns. That is not a bad stat line. Garrett Wilson was the leading receiver. Just the Aaron Rodgers Devontae Adams connection, by the way, it does not look good. A lot of the a lot of passes thrown Adams' way were just dropped or high and overthrown. Yeah, you could tell it's a very rusty connection that they haven't played with each other in a while. And people were banking on that connection to be like, oh, the Jets could come back and bounce back. No, I think this is now. Yeah, this is the second game for Devontae Adams with Aaron Rodgers, and it's not looked good. And admittedly, this is only their second game back together. But looking at their schedule, it doesn't get any easier. You got the Texans, who we just covered, are kind of depleted, but you never know. The Cardinals, who are a very scrappy team, we'll get to them in a bit. The Colts, who are in disarray, and the Seahawks. So there are some winnable-ish games here, but they've also got some scrappy teams as well. And yeah, the season's basically over for the Jets at this point. 2-6. You're on life support at this point. Another team on life support, the Cincinnati Bengals. They came into this game 3-4. When we get them back to 500, and it was at home, so they had won a game at home, so you would think, oh, they needed to win this game. They came out like with their hair on fire. Like they came down with a very clinical drive to start the game, took the lead, 10-3, and just looked good on offense. And then Evan McPherson misses a field goal, and that's when the game started to shift. And Eagles go down, score at the last second of the first half to tie to 10. And then um, The Eagles take a lead, 17-10, off a Jalen Hurts touchdown run. That was the second touchdown run of the game, if you include the tush push at the end of the first half. And then Chase Brown scores a 4-yard touchdown run to tie it back up. And then the Eagles score. They score 20 straight points to just sink the Bengals. It was a 45-yard bomb that took the lead for good for the Eagles from Jalen Hurts to Devonta Smith, and then the Bengals decide to go for it on fourth down in their own territory. To me, that feels like an act of desperation to get something going on offense, where the coach feels like you have to go for fourth down in a 24-17 game, and that just feels like a plea to do something on um to do something with it. It just, yeah, it was bad. It They unraveled quickly. Joe Burrow, um, you know, yeah, Joe Burrow, he played a pretty good game for the most part. He did have a pick in this game actually, kind of rare for him this year. But I mean, 26-37, 234 yards, a touchdown, and a pick wasn't his fault really completely. It was an overall meltdown in terms of everything. Mike Gesicki had a good game, 7 catches, 73 yards, led the receptions for and yards for the receivers for the Bengals in this game. And when the Eagles could keep Jamar Chase to only 54 yards, and they did have T Higgins to be fair, but still, it feels like Joe Burrow needs this team needs both of their top receivers to be at their A game or on the field, and they haven't had that for most of this year, and it showed that they cannot really beat much. And they beat the same teams. Them and the Eagles, Bengals and Eagles both beat the same teams in back-to-back weeks. And this was a game the Bengals needed. Eagles needed us also to keep pace in the division, and the Eagles showed they are the better team, and they nullified the Bengals D line, which is the key to beating the Bengals defense. Honestly, you can stop the D line, you can stop Trey Hendrickson. Mainly, you're going to have a pretty good game against the Bengals defense, and that's what happened. And Fred Johnson, that's the tackle that stopped Trey Hendrickson in this game, and he made it unbearably uncomfortable for him. So, yeah, good win for the Eagles. A lot of soul searching Bengals have to do now. Um, yeah, their season's on life support. They do have a game against the Raiders next week. That might be the game that they need to win for their season. Well, they need to win a lot. Joe Burrow himself has said they need to win 7 of 9. He thinks to win. I can't see this Bengals team winning 7 of 9 to end the year. And they could. They have the talent to. It's just a question of will they? And I don't know if I could see that happening. We had a close game in the Packers Jaguars game. This game was a lot closer than I expected. The Packers, early on, it seemed like they were gonna, take a pretty healthy lead in this game. It looked like they were gonna dominate it. They went up 10-0. Then the Jaguars all of a sudden came out of nowhere, made it a game, and yeah, this was 13-10 at the half in favor of the Packers. And then the Jaguars took the lead in the third quarter, 17-13. It just went back and forth, really. Uh, Jaguars tied with a minute 48 to go on an Evan Ingram touchdown catch from Trevor Lawrence. And yeah, this was a good game. And Brandon McManus, for the second game in a row, gets a game winner for the Packers, and the Packers escape out of Jacksonville with a win, 30-27. Because of I do want to note Jordan Love went out this game with what is now known as a slight groin injury. He went out, and Malik Willis came in, and threw a dot to Jayden Reed to set up the game winner. Um, yeah, this so Packers fans, I'm sure, were relieved that Jordan Love is going to be back in this game and back, you know, sooner than later for the Lions game, probably next week, which is such a huge game. Love didn't have the best stats. He had 14 of 22, 196 yards and a pick. Trevor Lawrence had a pretty good game for his standards, really, this year. 21 of 32, 308 yards, 2 touchdowns, a pick, and ran for a touchdown on a very physical touchdown run. Tate Bigsby had a decent game, 1878 yards for the Jags. Josh Jacobs had a very good game, 25 carries, 127 yards, 2 touchdowns. Tucker Kraft had a great game for the Packers as well, 3 catches, 79 yards and a touchdown. So 78 yards and a touchdown. So yeah, this was a good game overall. If you were neutral, Packers, they got away with, letting the Jaguars stick around. Um, this is kind of the season over for the Jaguars at this point, but it shows a lot of life and that there is still some talent. Unfortunately for the Jags, they did lose Christian Kirk to a fractured collarbone. He went out in this game with that injury, so he's out for the year, obviously. So just insult to injury for the Jaguars to end this game with. Um, we want to go quickly over a couple of games real quick. Titans Lions was a blowout. This was 52, I believe, 52 points by the end of the third quarter. Yeah, this was 52-14 by the end of the third quarter, and this was not close. It felt like it at first because the second quarter it was 21 to 4, it was 14-14 in the first minute of the second quarter when the Titans tied it up with a Westbrook Akine touchdown catch from Mason Rudolph. But then from there, the Lions just put the holy fear of God into the Titans and just showed them who's the better team. And yeah, Lions are 6-1 now after a resounding win. Yeah, but this was a beatdown of epic proportions. Just showed how the disparity between the two is, even though this was a competitive game for a quarter and a minute of it before the Lions just took control by the scruff of the neck. Yeah, this was bad for the Titans, obviously, but it still improved their draft pick, so that's something they could be happy about in this game. One thing to note as well, um, Jared Goff was held to under 100 yards in this game, and yeah, it's crazy that the Lions scored 52 points and st- still only had their quarterback throw for under 100 yards. Breaking news, also, another breaking news as we're recording. Um, the Baltimore Ravens just traded with the Panthers for Deontay Johnson. So the Ravens, load up on that receiving core. Speaking of the Ravens, you know they, you know, they needed this because they had Zay Flowers and Nelson Aguilar and no one else really catching passes for them. Um, Lamar just gets another weapon. So it's a good move for them in terms of, making sure the receiving core is good, trying to bolster, doing what the Chiefs and the Bills did. I guess this is, good because, like, it feels like a try to add more weapons to make sure they're even better. And I get it because it's an arms race at this point for the AFC. Everyone's trying to load up and beat the Chiefs to make sure that the three-peat doesn't happen. So I get where the Ravens are coming from. Just, feels like a very interesting move for them. We'll see how it works out. Very well could work out well. Speaking of the Ravens, they lost this week, 29-24 to the Cleveland Browns. Yeah, this was a weird game. Um, Ravens came out swinging in this game. Trailing 3-0 to begin and the first quarter. No one could get going in that first quarter, and then after that, just kind of they traded blows the entire game, and kept the lead kept changing. The Browns took a 6-3 lead, then the Ravens took a 10-6 lead into the half. Um, yeah. Oh, by the way, the pick it's a pick swap for Deontay Johnson, Baltimore's fifth rounder this year. goes for Carolina's sixth rounder this year, and Deontay Johnson. So they get Deontay Johnson and a sixth rounder for a fifth. So quite an interesting trade there for the Ravens to get Deontay Johnson, good receiver, very low, cheap cost receiver to improve a squad that has good depth on their receiving chart, just not a lot of big names. So this adds a big name to the list of receivers there. Yeah, back to the game. Um, Ravens just couldn't seem to get the lead back. They had the lead 24-23 with 2:36 left. The Browns are driving, and Jameis throws a pass to Elijah Moore. Kyle Hamilton has the ball in his hands and drops it. He drops the game-winning pick in his hands, and on the very next play, Jameis Winston, who had come in for the injured Deshaun Watson, throws the game winner with 59 seconds to go, and that's all she wrote because the Ravens drove. They did, but they couldn't score. And yeah, the Ravens get their third loss of the year. Browns get their second win of the year. Jameis played great for the Browns. 27-41, 334 yards, three touchdowns. Lamar didn't play bad either, to be fair. 23-38, 289 yards, two touchdowns. To me, this shows the Ravens, I've kind of been saying it for a few weeks, but the Ravens have a very inconsistent defense. They have holes on it. It's just, how you exploit it. And the Browns showed how you can exploit it. A good run game by Nick Chubb helps, and then the play action really, I think, have helped it as well. Nick Chubb had a decent game, 16 for 52 yards. It's his second game back, and he was a good part of it. Even though Cedric Tillman probably was the answer for the Browns on the passing game. Um, he had 7 catches, 99 yards, and two touchdowns. So a pretty good day for the young man. Yeah, this was a game, an AFC North game, typical divisional game. That's just absolute craziness. Um, and yeah, the Browns show they can compete, and a lot of people are saying, "Oh, this shows that it was always Deshaun Watson's fault." I would say this is more than just Deshaun Watson. That's the problem for the for the Browns. I think it's also just a lack of talent overall. But at the same time, like the defense has always been good for the Browns and it kept them in some games. It's just the offense hasn't been able to complement them. And they don't have a great amount of talent. They did have Nick Chubb come back only for a second game, so that helps them as well. But yeah, they don't have a lot of like wide receiver talent either, especially since they traded Amari Cooper. So I don't think you could just pinpoint it on Deshaun Watson exclusively, even though that is a major part of it, I would say. Another uh, crazy game that happened. Cardinals pull out a win in the Tua return. Tua came back for this game, and Cardinals pull out a win, 28-27. Tua played pretty good for the most part. He ran the ball well, passed it for 28 to 38, 234 yards and a touchdown. Just Kyler Murray had another great game, as did James Conner. Kyler went 26 to 36 for 370 yards and two touchdowns. James Conner had 20 carries for 53 yards and a touchdown. It's another good, solid, scrappy win for the Cardinals. Marvin Harrison went off in this game as well as Trey McBride. Trey McBride had 9 catches for 124 yards. Um, the Dolphins, it felt like they kind of had this game in the bag for a large chunk of it. They led 20-10 in the third quarter. Just the Cardinals kept hanging around and hanging around. And even when the Dolphins took a 27-18 lead, a 9-point lead, off a Raheem Mostert 6-yard touchdown run in the fourth quarter, the the Cardinals just stiffened and took the last uh, they took the last 10 points off the board and won this game in the final seconds once again with Chad Ryland after beating the Chargers the same way the last week. So, yeah, this is another good win. And ironically enough, that puts the Cardinals in first place in the division. So, very good result for the Cardinals. Um, and the crazy part is, with this loss, the AFC East standings are crazy. You go look at the Bills, who dominated the Seahawks, by the way. They're 6-2. The Dolphins are 2-5. The Patriots are 2-6, and the Jets are 2-6. So this is a pretty bleh division this year. It kind of you kind of expected it, even though you thought the Dolphins might be playoff contenders this year with Tua, like they usually are. But this year they have not been good at all. Mostly because Tua's been out for most of the year. But it just sucks for the Tua and the Dolphins that they lose this game on his return in Miami, and it leaves them with a lot of questions as to, what they do with this talent after this year. Is it going to be blown up? Is it, whatever's? I mean, the season's not over, obviously. There's still a lot of games to be played. The Dolphins could easily get back into the playoff race, but their season is on life support as well for the Dolphins, and they need to figure out quickly, or else they too shall perish into the NFL season afterlife. Another crazy good game was the Falcons Bucks. Falcons another crazy um had a this was a good divisional game. Falcons Bucks followed up their Thursday night thriller with another decent win. It was the game, the score makes it look a lot closer than you'd have expected than it actually was for most of it. Falcons dominated it for the first three quarters, had a 31-17 lead going into the fourth, and then the Bucks got a safety and a touchdown to make it 31-26. Baker had a usual stat line this year of 330 yards, three touchdowns, two picks. The picks are starting to become a problem with Baker, actually, because he's like, this is like his second or third game out of four where he's just like throw two picks um, constantly. And it's you know, kind of concerning a little bit. Kirk had a good game, 278 yards, four touchdowns. Bijan Robinson had a good game, 13 carries for 63 yards. Bucky Irving had a good game for the Bucks. It just wasn't enough. Kyle Pitts he went off of this game. Four catches, 91 yards, two touchdowns. There was a bit of controversy that he might not have scored a touchdown in this game. He kind of got pulled up on at the pylon, but it was, I think, ruled a touchdown. And this game got away from the Bucks early, and they never let go. And it just shows the Falcons have the poise and the team and the players to win this division against a good Bucks team that was kind of decimated. The Bucks put up a bit of a fight, made it close, a respectable score, but it feels like the offense is kind of now a very much run heavy offense that really needs a lot of support for the run game in order to be good. And this was the Bucks took a 14-7 lead in the second quarter. They just couldn't do anything after that. It was kind of sad that losing Mike Evans and Chris Godwin kind of hampers them. Now we're going to see how they play. They have the Chiefs next week in Tampa, so that's going to be an interesting game for Monday night. But if they can put up this kind of a fight, uh, that'll be interesting. But yeah, it did, to me, it didn't feel as close as the score indicates. So yeah, good win for the Falcons. Kind of devastating for the Bucks because now they're kind of just behind the eight ball and figure out where they are really in the playoff race. The Chargers Saints game was kind of a wash, really. Chargers just blew the Saints out pretty badly. Again, Spencer Rattler started for the Saints in this game. He He only had 156 yards on 12 of 24 passing. No touchdowns were scored in this game for the Saints. This was a 8-5 score for most of this game until the Chargers just broke out the big guns in the fourth quarter to make it a 26-8 final. And yeah, it's just the Chargers were the Chargers in this game. Run and pound the ground as ground game as much as possible. Justin Herbert, he went 20 of 32 for 279 yards and 2 touchdowns. They got just enough for the passing game and, let J.K. Dobbins cook for the most part. This was actually a 3-2 game until late in the second quarter when J.K. Dobbins got a touchdown to make it 9-2. So yeah, this to make it 9-2 and then 9-5 actually before Chargers just kind of slowly took this game away. It just showed that they were the better team in this game. Saints just yeah, they're kind of lost. The season's all pretty much over for them too. Unfortunately, after such a hot start to the year where they went 2-0, they were scoring a ton of points in those games. Yeah, it just man, that feels harsh for them. But yeah, the Chargers, they keep rolling. They try to keep themselves in the playoff discussion, and they are for the most part. So yeah, this should be yeah shows that I mean, even though the Chargers won, it was kind of an ugly win as well. Um, show that they still kind of have a lot of issues on the receiver end, but the Saints are just bad enough that kind of mask those issues a bit. So yeah, moving on, the Bills dismantled the Seahawks 31-10. Seahawks couldn't get out of their own way. They had chances to actually make this a close game in the red zone. They just bungled it pretty badly and just couldn't get out of their own way. Turnovers, um, and just incompetent play calling at the goal line. Um, Gino had 212 yards and a pick. Josh Allen actually threw a pick in this game. 283 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. So Geno Smith was also the lead rusher. Shows you how bad the run game was for the Seahawks. They just couldn't get out of their own way. And by the time they scored a touchdown with 8:02 left in the fourth, it was already 31-10. So yeah, they just couldn't do anything in this game. You had to feel bad for them. Jackson Smith and Jimba had 6 catches for 69 yards for the Seahawks. So yeah, this was a pretty convincing win for the Bills, who went to 6-2. They're halfway to clinching their division, I'm pretty sure, or 3/4 of it actually, probably, with this season already halfway over, and everyone else in the division having at least 5 losses. So yeah, this is a good win for the Bills to just kind of say, hey, we are here. Being a Seahawks team that trounced the Falcons last week. So this was huge for them. Uh, Seahawks have a lot of questions now. If they fall to 4-4, they just feel so inconsistent. You never know what Seahawks team is going to show up one week to the next. Commanders Bears was another weird game. Um, the Commanders had a 12-0 lead, had a 9-0 lead at one point, and then 12-0 before the Bears scored a touchdown to make it 12-7. And that's when things got crazy. Because then the Bears, they took it kind of hung in the balance for a bit before uh, the Bears got the ball and drove down the field, and they decided to get a little cute, hand the ball off to an offensive lineman who never gets it in his belly, in his gut, as he's being handed off to. He fumbles it, and it's picked up by the Commanders, and you think, okay, the Commanders are just going to assault this one away. Nope, they go 3-and-out because the Bears defense was pretty good this game. And then the Bears get it right back. They drive down the field in a great 2-minute drill drive, score a touchdown on a 1-yard touchdown run, which they should have done the first time they had it down the one. And then they get the 2-point conversion to make it 18-15. I mean 15-12. And then the Commanders just drive and get a 12-yard pass to set themselves up for a Hail Mary at about their own 48. And yeah, then Jalen Daniels gets 12 seconds to throw the ball, and he gets it down the field. It's tipped up in the air, and Noah Brown catches it. Commanders win. Yeah, this was a game that the Bears wanted to really show they could compete with the big guys of the NFC this year. That they were actually for real. That they just have been beating up on bad teams. And this shows like yeah, they have the defense to compete and the offense can move the ball. That like Caleb Williams is getting better, but like there's still some holes on this team still on offense particularly. The defense played out of their minds great on both sides for the Commanders and the Bears. Commanders just their defense has been getting better. They're 6-2 now. They lead the division because of the Eagles had their bye. The Commanders have not yet, so that's a big part of it. But still, they keep pace. Jaden Daniels had a solid enough game that they just were able to keep themselves in it and win the game with a Hail Mary. Um, One thing that's just absolutely stupid: Tyreek Stevenson was seen celebrating in the end zone as the Hail Mary's being played out. The Hail Mary plays being played out. And then he runs over towards the play, and he's the one that tips it to Noah Brown in the back of the end zone where he's just standing by himself. So kind of a boneheaded move, if you ask me, for him to be doing that while the final play is being run. He did it is reported that he did apologize to his teammates afterwards. So good on him for owning up and taking accountability. But yeah, huge win for the Commanders to stay alive in their division race with the Eagles, and yeah, devastating loss for the Bears because it's such a tight division there. The Packers are 6-2. Um, you have the Vikings who are also in third place because of this. The Bears with this loss are fourth or last place at 4-3. Meanwhile, the Packers are 6-2. The Lions are 6-1. So yeah, this is a very compact division, and you have the Packers and Lions playing next week. So this was a huge chance for the Bears to kind of assert themselves in the race, maybe put the Vikings down in fourth place actually with a win. So this was devastating for the Bears. They will definitely look to bounce back next week. Broncos Panthers, pretty simple game. Bryce Young was starting this game because of Andy Dalton being hurt in a car accident in Charlotte earlier last week. So Bryce Young was tapped to start, and they have nobody to play for him at receiver. Even Deontay Johnson was out, and we now know why because he's now traded to the Ravens, as we discussed earlier. Um, yeah, the Broncos dominated this game from pretty much start to finish, as we kind of expected. Um, it was 28-7 by the end of the third quarter. You know, and with 18 seconds left, the Panthers got a garbage time touchdown to make it a two-score game. But of course, that didn't matter. Broncos just looked pretty good this game against a pretty bad Panthers team. And yeah, Broncos showed out that they could, you know, their defense showed out as well as they are one of the best defenses in the NFL. And now they have tests with now they get their tests. They get the Ravens and the Chiefs back to back, and the Falcons actually after that. So they get some tests to show how good they actually are. But a good warm up, good way to get a win. Their fifth win of the year. They are 5-3 now. Panthers, of course, are their season's over at 1-7, and they are now starting to fire sale as they just traded Deontay Johnston to the Ravens. So, um, yeah, that's all you kind of really need to say about that one. Niners Cowboys. Um, this was a weird game, really, to be honest. Cowboys with 3:22 left in the game. This was a 30-17 game with like 4:25 to go. Cowboys score a late touchdown. It looks like they're going to be able to go for it again, go and try to actually take the lead in the game, and they can't do anything with it. They get at their own 25 with 3:05 to go, actually, because they forced the Niners to punt on a three-play, 27-second drive, and they just can't do anything with it. Dak, plays his usual game against the Niners where he throws costly picks. Um, Niners just took advantage of it, and George Kittle had a beast of a game for the Niners. 6 catches, 128 yards, and a touchdown. CeeDee Lamb didn't have a bad game himself. 13 catches, 148 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Dak, 243 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 picks. Brock Purdy was a great. This was a game where both teams were kind of mid, to be honest. Um, Niners just tried to scrape by, get to the bye week. After an ugly loss to the Chiefs last week, they bounced back, get a solid win that kind of just puts the Cowboys with a lot of questions more than answers. They don't have a good defense. They don't have a great offense. There's a lot of people calling for this team to be blown up, and I can't blame them because the Cowboys, they don't like the word rebuild. And, because they want to be America's team. They want to always be seen as competing for the Super Bowl. But, at some point, when you're paying a guy $60 million and he's costing you games like Dak is, it's kind of hard to ignore. But yeah, this was a game that Niners needed to win to keep track with the Cardinals in the division. Surprisingly enough to say. And so, yeah, it's a three-way tie at the top of the NFC West with the Cardinals, the Niners, and the Seahawks at 4-4. Niners needed this as they go into the bye week. They are hoping they will get Christian McCaffrey, their the reigning offensive player of the year, and back next week after the bye. So, that would be huge for them. But there's nothing guaranteed about that because he has Achilles tendonitis in both his legs. Um, like I said, the Cowboys, they're technically, statistically not out of this because they're 3-4. But it sure looks bleak. They are third in the division just because, you know, they have the Giants in their division. So yeah, it's not looking great for the Cowboys. I believe in the playoff standings right now. If the playoffs were to happen, they would not be in the playoffs. They would be the 13th seed right now. They would be 2 games back of the Eagles for that spot, with a lot of tiebreakers having been lost to a lot of teams, especially because their conference record is not great. And they are 1-3 in the NFC, and that's going to kill them. I think come the tiebreakers. Considering you have the Eagles who have 3-2 conference record, Bucks have 4-2. Yeah, conference records are starting to kind of be important in the playoff races. So yeah, the more losses you have in your conference, the worse it's going to be for you come time to fight for those last 2 seeds in each conference. The Steelers and the Giants played on Monday night. This was a game that was pretty close for the first half, pretty even. Both teams had touchdowns called back due to penalty in the first half. This was a 9-9 game headed to the half. And then the Steelers just took over because of a 73-yard punt return touchdown by Calvin Austin to give the Steelers the lead. And they just took it a 23-9 lead after Calvin Austin scores another touchdown off a touchdown pass this time. And yeah, the Steelers just never looked back. And yeah, I mean, let's be fair to the Giants. Daniel Jones did not play a bad game for the first half. Second half, he just kind of turned back to what people assume of Daniel Jones. He had 264 yards and a pick. And yeah, Russell Wilson played a pretty solid game overall. 20 of 28, 278 yards and a touchdown. Najee Harris had himself a game with 19 carries for 114 yards. Tyrone Tracy for the Giants, caps off to him. He had 20 carries for 145 yards and a touchdown. And Darius Slade for the Giants had 4 catches for 108 yards. So this is just, the Giants did their best. They just kind of the story of their year. They just can't score touchdowns reliably. They did score one with 11:07 left in the game to make it a 8-point game, and then a field goal with 5:05 left to make it an 8-point game again after the Steelers got their own field goal. But it just wasn't enough. They just can't. Giants can't score touchdowns, and that was kind of if they had probably the first half, this game might have been a lot closer. But it just felt like the Steelers kind of took over the second half and never looked back. Um, so yeah, a good win for the Steelers. This actually keeps them in first place in the division in their division. They are now a game ahead of the Ravens for first. And yeah, they needed this win to kind of keep showing that Russ is the quarterback for them. Justin Fields was the third string quarterback actually for this game as he has a hamstring injury, so that's something to keep an eye on as well. Um, Final game of the week: Chiefs Raiders. That was on Sunday. I kind of went out of order. Um, Chiefs got DeAndre Hopkins into the game for this one, and it kind of started like a typical divisional game. This was a 17-10 game at the half. Chiefs led. They kind of let the Raiders do some things in the first half, but then when you got to the second half, third quarter was the only score there was a field goal by Daniel Carlson, 17-13. It just didn't feel like once the fourth quarter happened. Um, in a lot of cases, this was the most comfortable game for the Chiefs all year offensively. Patrick Mahomes had a deflected pass picked off um, in the late in the game that the Raiders took to the 3-yard line. They were at the 8 when Mahomes threw the pick. The Chiefs were, and then the Chiefs had a goal line stand. That really turned the momentum of the game. Chiefs went on from there, scored a 98-yard touchdown drive to make it 20-13. I mean, to make it 27-13 in the fourth quarter with 4:59 to go, and just the Raiders scored a garbage time touchdown to make it 27-20. Typical divisional game. Kind of, it didn't feel close like that for long stretches of the game. Just didn't feel like the Raiders could do anything, scoring wise in terms of touchdowns. They did score the one touchdown in the first quarter, and then score another touchdown the last the until 2 minutes to go in the game. So yeah, it really, even though the score looked close, you never felt like the Raiders were actually going to score a touchdown in this game because the Chiefs defense once again just was an absolute beast in this game. They kept Alexander Madison only had 15 rushing yards on 14 carries. Patrick Mahomes had probably one of his best games of the year. 27-38, 262 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. But like I said, that was a deflected pass. I don't necessarily think that was on him. Gardner Minshew, 24 of 30, 209 yards, 2 touchdowns. And yeah, this Travis Kelce scored his first touchdown of the year. He had 10 catches for 90 yards as well. DeAndre Hopkins got in the action as well with 3 catches. So overall, yeah, like I said, the Chiefs looked a lot more comfortable in this game offensively. And of course, the defense, as always, has showed out for Kansas City. And they keep on trucking. They're 7-0 now, heading to their Monday night game against Tampa. And yeah, this was a good game to kind of get off of their backs after losing to this Raiders team on Christmas Day last year. Their last loss, actually. Um, they needed this win, and they got it. It felt convincing for the most part, even if the score doesn't show it at times. Um, yeah, this Chiefs identity looks really solid. They know how to win games, know how to play in the clutch. They converted 12 out of 15 third downs, and yeah, Patrick Mahomes was 8 of 9, actually 9 of 9 on third down situations as well. So very good win for the Chiefs. Gets them another win in the division. They also have a 2-game lead in the conference in terms of the first round bye. So overall, they I'm sure they appreciated the chaos that happened all this week. And that's your grid sides recap and news for the week. A lot to go over, I know, but it was a really fun week in terms of games in the NFL and EFL. Really good stuff. Lots of chaos, lots of drama. That's what we sports fans love. Um, Thank you so much for tuning in this week. We really appreciate it. Please follow us and give us a like, a subscribe, review, a comment on any and all platforms: YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, uh, Audible. We are on all those platforms. Any comments, reviews, suggestions are greatly appreciated. And we will see you all for the next episode.